peel. Banana. Wonder what that has to do with today's story. Well, we'll find out shortly. Today's story. Just wait till we're done. Today's story comes from this book. The name of the book is Council's Wine Pit. This is a book filled with Indonesian folk tales. Now, the country of Indonesia is a country surrounded by water, and a couple of things you have to know about Indonesia. In Indonesia, the people pray and worship a god called Allah. They don't call their god God. To them, it is Allah. Concho is a small little creature, the size of a mouse, but his head and his face looks just like a deer, so he's called a deer mouse. In Indonesia, Concho is a hero. He's such a little bitty thing, he's got a big mouth. He always is talking, and his mouth always gets him in trouble, but he's very smart. He's like you, very smart. His mouth always gets him out of trouble. Once upon a time, long ago, Concho the mouse deer, walking down the road on a bright sunny day, walking down the road just enjoying himself. All of a sudden he smells something. His mouth starts drooling. He's walking, the smell is getting stronger, and he's drooling. He stops. He recognizes the smell. Banana bread. Concho loves banana bread. It's his favorite food. Follows his nose. The smell is getting stronger and stronger. Pretty soon he looks up. There's a farmhouse. Now remember, Concho is very smart. He knows somewhere in that house there's got to be banana bread. Runs up on a porch, jumps up on the window ledge. He looks in. Well, by this time he's just drooling all over banana bread. The smell is driving him crazy. He looks in the window. Sure enough, there it is on the table. 2 loaves of banana bread, still steaming. They're nice and hot. Both the loaves are wrapped in banana peels. Concho looks, can't stand it. The smell's so good, he's drooling. Jumps off the ledge, goes over to the door, opens it up with his nose, in he goes. Jumps up on the table, takes a little taste of that banana bread, takes another taste. Boy, best banana bread he ever had. Takes another little taste. Finally, he looks around, he doesn't see anybody. Thinks to himself, you know, if I take this whole loaf, the farmer and his wife will never miss it. They've got another one here. He scoops it up, peel and all. Out the door he goes, walking around down the road, and he's eating out of that banana bread, and his head is going further and further into that peel. Can't see where he's going. All of a sudden, he feels himself going down, 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 down. He finally lands, looks up, he fell into a big open lime pit, big hole. Looks up. Now, Concho knows he's a great jumper, but there's no way he can jump that high. So he's wondering, how am I going to get out of this pit? He's thinking and thinking. He's still got that banana peel in his hand. All of a sudden, he starts walking around. He starts to read that banana peel. Allah, 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 Allah. He's walking in a circle. Allah, Allah. Pretty soon he hears a noise. He looks up. There's a big lion. A lion hollers down. What's going on down there? What are you doing? Concho looks up. It's I, Concho the mouse deer. The lion says, what are you doing? Concho says, I'm reading the holy book. He goes, Allah, Allah, Allah. The lion says, what does the Holy Book say? Concho says, well, it says right here. Allah says, today is doomsday. The lion says, doomsday? What is that, Concho? Concho says, well, it says right here, doomsday, the world is coming to an end. All the animals are going to die, except those that are down in this hole with me. Well, you know, that lion, he's no dummy either, so he thinks, well, I don't want to die. I want to come down in the pit with you. And can I come down, Concho? Concho said, just a minute. Allah, Allah, Allah. He said, Allah says right here, if you're going to come down in this pit, you got to be perfectly clean. Have you had your bath today? The lion says, no, I haven't had my bath today. Concho says, well, you can't come down here, then you're going to have to die with all the other animals. The lion says, well, I'm just going to run right over there to the river. I'm going to jump in, take a bath, and I'm going to come back, and then I'll come down. Concho said, okay. So the lion runs out to the river. Concho keeps walking around, reading that banana peel. Allah, Allah, Allah. There's a noise again. He looks up, there's the lion. The lion looks down, he's got a smile on his face. He said, I just took a bath, I'm nice and clean. I want to be saved. Can I come down there with you? No, just a minute, Concho says, and he starts reading. Allah, Allah, oh, right here at the very bottom. Allah says, you can't come into this pit unless you promise not to sneeze. Because if you sneeze, Allah says we got to throw you out of the pit and you'll die with all the other animals. Well, the lion thinks for a while. He said, well, I promise I won't sneeze. And what I'm going to do is if I feel a sneeze coming on, I'm just going to take my big paw, put it over my nose so I can't sneeze. Concho says, good, come on down. So the lion jumps down in the pit. Now you've got Concho, the little mouse deer, going around, and big lion right in back of him, following him around. Concho starts reading again. Allah, Allah, Allah. Pretty soon, here's a noise. He looks up. There's a tiger, big tiger. Tiger hollers down. Who's down there? What are you doing? Concho looks up. It's I, Concho the mouse deer. I'm down here with Mr. Lion. What are you doing down there? Concho says, we're reading the Holy Book. Allah, Allah, Allah. Tiger says, what does the Holy Book say? Concho tells him. It says here that today is doomsday. Allah says the world is coming to an end. All the animals are going to die, except those that are down in this hole with me and the lion. Tiger's pretty smart himself, so he thinks, and finally he says, you know, I don't want to die. I want to be saved, so can I come down there with you and Lion? Concho said, just a minute. And he starts, Allah, Allah, Allah. Well, it says right here, Allah says you can't come down in this pit unless you've had a bath. You've got to be clean. Have you had your bath today? Tiger says, no, I haven't had it, but I'm going to run right to the river, take a bath, then I'm going to come down and jump in the hole. Concho says, okay. Tiger runs to the river. Concho and the lion are going around. Allah, Allah, Allah. Hear a noise. They look up. There's the tiger. Big smile on his face. He said, Concho, I just took a bath. I'm nice and clean. I want to come down in the hole so I can be saved. Concho said, just a minute. Allah, Allah, Allah. Oh, it says right here at the very bottom, you can't come down in this hole unless you promise that you won't sneeze. Because Allah says right here, if you sneeze, we're going to have to throw you out of the pit and you're going to die with the rest of the animals. Well, the tiger thinks, and pretty soon he says, you know, that's easy. If I feel a sneeze coming on, I'll just take my paw, put it over my nose, so then I can't sneeze. Concho says, good, come on down. So down comes the tiger. Now you've got Concho, the little mouse deer, walking around. You've got the lion behind him, and you've got Tiger behind him, and they're walking around, and Concho's still reading. Allah, Allah, Allah. Pretty soon they hear a big, big noise. Look up, what do you think is there? Mr. Elephant. That big elephant hollers down there, what are you doing? Who's down there? Concho looks up. It's I, Concho the mouse here, and I'm down here in this pit with Lion and Tiger. What are you doing down there? The elephant hollers. Concho says, we're reading the holy book. The elephant says, well, what does it say? Concho goes, Allah, Allah, Allah. It says here that the world is coming to an end today, and Allah says all the animals are going to die except those that are down here in this pit with me. Well, the elephant, he's pretty smart. He's thinking, he said, I don't want to die, I want to be saved, so I'm coming down in the pit. Concho goes, no, just a minute. Allah, Allah, Allah. It says right here, you can't come into this pit unless you're perfectly clean. Now, I know you haven't had a bath because I can smell you. You smell terrible. So the elephant said, yeah, I haven't had my bath, but I'm going to run right over to the river, and I'm going to take my trunk, and I'm going to swish it in there, and I'm going to give myself a shower so I'm nice and clean. Then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to come in the pit with you. Concho says, okay. So they're walking around, Concho, the lion, and the tiger, and Concho is still reading, Allah, 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 off of the banana peel, and they hear that big noise. They look up, see the elephant. He's looking down, and he's smiling, and he says, Concho, I just took a shower. Put my trunk in the water, and I sprayed all over. I'm nice and clean. Now can I come down? Concho said, just a minute. Allah, Allah, Allah. Down here, it says that in order for you to come in the pit, you're going to have to promise that you won't sneeze. Well, the elephant said, that's easy. I promise I won't sneeze, because if I feel a sneeze coming on, I'll take my big foot, put it on my trunk, and I'll stop the sneeze. Concho says, okay, come on down. So the elephant jumps down in the pit. Now you've got little Concho the mouse here walking around. You've got the lion, the tiger, and that big elephant. And they're all walking around in a circle following Concho. And Concho is reading on that banana peel. Allah, Allah, Allah. All of a sudden, the lion stops. Just before he sneezes, he takes his paw, puts it over his nose, and he stops to sneeze. Concho looks up at him and says, you know, lion, you're lucky. If you would have sneezed, we would have to throw you out of the pit, and you would have died with all the rest of the animals. So they continue to walk around. Concho is reading, Allah, Allah, Allah. Pretty soon, the tiger steps out of the line. Just before he sneezed, what does he do? He takes his paw, he puts it over his nose, and he stops to sneeze. Concho says to him, boy, are you lucky, tiger. If you would have sneezed, we'd have to throw you right out of the pit, and you would have died with the rest of the animals. So they're walking around again, and Concho's still reading, Allah, Allah, Allah. All of a sudden, the elephant stops. Just before he's ready to sneeze, he takes his big foot and puts it on his trunk, and he stops to sneeze. And Concho kind of smiles, and he says, boy, are you lucky. As big as you are, if you would have sneezed, we would have had to take you and throw you out of that pit, and you would have died with the rest of the animals. So they continue to walk around. Concho is reading, Allah, Allah, Allah. All of a sudden, Concho stops. He throws that banana peel. Shoot! He sneezes. The animals grab him, and they throw him out of that pit. Concho lands on his feet. He looks down. He's smiling. He straightens himself up, turns around, starts walking down the road. Now, I know where he's going. Do you? Where's he going? Exactly. He's going back to get that other loaf of banana bread. So there you see, Concho's pretty smart. He figured a way to get out of that pit. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes to get... Wonder what the old storyteller has in his bag today. Should we take a look? Well, little green pot. Look at here. Can of green peas. Frying pan. Now there's something else in here. Whistle. Wonder what all of this has got to do with today's story. Let's find out. Now, today's story is a little longer, and it's a hard story to tell, so I need you to sit quietly, give me your attention. I want to be distracted when I get into the story. This story is, if not my favorite, it's one of my all-time favorites. The name of the story is Green Pea John. Now, this is an old story, and it's told in many countries all around the world. Nobody knows exactly when it started or in which country it originated in. Green Pea John was a man a little like you and a little like me. He was very, very, very smart, but he was lazy. In fact, he was so lazy, he didn't even have a job. And since he didn't have a job, couldn't pay his rent. Now, Green Pea John's landlord was rich. He had all kinds of money, but he was cheap. In fact, he was so tight he almost squeaked when he walked. And the landlord didn't like Green Pea John because Green Pea John never paid his rent. And worse than that, he always tried to cheat the landlord. Well, it stands to reason that the landlord didn't like Green Pea John. One day, the landlord is thinking about Green Pea John, and he's thinking about the 3 months back rent that Green Pea John owed him. And he's thinking, and the more he thought, the madder he got. Finally, he decided he's going to pay a visit to Green Pea John and try to collect that rent. So he starts walking down the road, and he's thinking about that 3 months rent and about Green Pea John, and he's getting madder and madder and madder. And of course, the madder he gets, the faster he walks. The madder he gets, the faster he walks. Pretty soon, he's running, and he's shaking his fist and he's hollering, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John, Green Pea John." Here's John, sitting on his porch in his favorite rocker, just rocking away, and he looks up, and there he sees that landlord running down the road, screaming, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John." He gets up, runs in the house, closes the door, goes into the kitchen, he gets a big kettle, he fills it full of water, takes a can of green peas, opens it up, pours the peas into the kettle, puts it on the stove, boils it. Then he takes those peas, puts them in the green pot, goes over, and he sits in the middle of the floor. And he starts stirring those peas. And he's stirring, and he's whistling and stirring. Pretty soon he hears the landlord up on the porch, and he hears a pounding on the door. The landlord's hollering, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John." Green Pea John answers in a faint little voice, "Come right in, come right in." The landlord goes in and he looks. There's Green Pea John, sitting in the middle of the floor with that little green pot, and he's stirring, and he's whistling, he's stirring. The landlord thinks, "Boy, this guy's gone nuts." So he asks Green Pea John, he said, "John, "What are you doing?" John said, "Well, that's easy. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm cooking these peas in the pot for supper." The landlord kind of looks at him. Boy, this guy's really lost his mind. And he says, "John, how can you possibly be cooking anything in that pot? There's no fire." John just kind of laughed and he said, "Well, that's easy. This is a magic pot. You can cook anything without a fire." He stirs and he whistles. He says, "You don't need a fire. Here, try these." And he gives the landlord a little taste of the peas. Well, of course, they're still hot. Boy, the landlord is thinking, now remember, he's very cheap. He's thinking, boy, would I like to have that pot. If I have that pot, my wife could cook with no fire. I could save lots of money. So he's thinking, how can I get that pot from Green Pea John? So he thinks, pretty soon he says, "John, I'll tell you what. Instead of the 3 months rent, I'll forgive you 1 month's rent. You only owe me 2 months rent, but you have to give me the pot." Well, Green Pea John, he said, "This is a magic pot, and I can't do that." The landlord says, "All right, John, I'll tell you. I've got to have that pot. You give me the pot. I'll forego the 3 months' rent. You don't owe me any rent." Well, John quickly said, "Okay, only because you're my friend." He gives the landlord the pot. Well, the landlord is happy as can be, and he's smiling, and he takes that pot, and he heads for home. Green Pea John goes back on his porch. He sits in his chair, and he's rocking away. The landlord gets home, opens the door, he goes in, there's his wife cooking supper. Well, he's anxious to show his wife what a good deal he made with John. So he goes into the kitchen, grabs a can of green peas, he opens it up, puts them in the pot, goes into the middle, sits down in the middle of the floor, just like Green Pea John. He starts stirring those peas, and he's stirring those peas, and he's whistling, and he's stirring, and he's whistling, and he's stirring. Taste the peas. Well, of course, they're cold. Well, his wife comes in, and she looks, and she said, "What are you doing, you stupid man? What are you doing?" And he looks at her, and he said, "Well, what does it look like I'm doing? I'm cooking these peas in this magic pot I got from John. I'm going to eat these peas for supper." And the wife says, "Boy, you're so stupid. You can't cook anything in that pot. There isn't any fire." And he looks at his wife, and he says, "Well, John said this was a magic pot. You don't need any fire." And he keeps stirring and whistling and stirring and whistling. Tastes the peas again. Of course, they're cold. Finally, his wife looks in and said, "You're so stupid. Don't you know you've been tricked again by Green Pea John?" He tastes those peas once more, and he finally realizes that Green Pea John tricked him. All night long, the landlord was thinking of Green Pea John and how John tricked him with that pot. Couldn't sleep all night long. He was so mad. He got up bright and early in the morning, went down the road again to see Green Pea John. And he's walking down that road, and he's thinking about Green Pea John and the 3 months' rent, and how John gave him that stupid pot that wasn't magic at all. And he's getting madder and madder, and pretty soon, the madder he got, the faster he's going, and pretty soon he's running full blast, and he's hollering, he's shaking his fist, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John, Green Pea John." Well, there's John, sitting on the porch, in that rocker, just rocking away. He looks up, and he sees that landlord just tearing full speed down the road, hollering, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John." John jumps out of his chair, he jumps up, he goes into the house, closes the door behind him, and he calls his wife. "Wife, the landlord is running down the road. When he gets here, I'm going to take this frying pan, and I'm going to hit you over the head with it, and you fall to the floor and play dead. Then, when I take this whistle, and I blow the whistle, you jump up and run into the other room." Well, the wife didn't know anything what was going on, but John was her husband, so she said, okay, I'll do it. She goes into the other room and then comes back out. They're standing there in the kitchen. Pretty soon, terrible pounding on the door. Landlord. Green Pea John starts hollering, "You stupid woman! You stupid woman! You stupid woman!" Well, the landlord thinks there's a big fight going on, so he opens the door and he walks in. There's Green Pea John standing over his wife with that frying pan. Boom! He hits her on the head. She falls to the floor. The landlord turns, he's white. He's scared, and he says, "John! John! You've killed your wife! You've killed your wife!" John says, "Well, of course I did. But watch this." He takes that whistle, blows the whistle. His wife jumps up and she runs in the other room. The landlord is just amazed. He says to John, "John, how did you do that?" And John said, "Well, that's easy. You see this whistle? It's a magic whistle. Whenever somebody dies or an animal dies, all you have to do is blow on this whistle once, maybe a couple times, and they come back to life." That's all that cheap landlord had to hear. He thought to himself, boy, if I had this whistle, every time one of my cows died, all I'd have to do is blow on the whistle, the cow would come back to life. I'd never have to buy any more cows. I'd have more money than I got now. So he's thinking, how can I get that whistle from Green Pea John? And he's thinking, pretty soon he said, "I'll tell you what, John, I want that whistle. You don't owe me 3 months' rent, and I won't even be mad that you tricked me with that stupid clock." John said, "Geez, I can't do that. You know, this is a magic whistle." The landlord said, "Okay, John, you're a hard man to bargain with, but I'll tell you what. You don't owe me 3 months' rent. I won't be mad about the pot, that you tricked me with that stupid pot. Besides, I'll give you the next 5 months free rent." Well, John, give him the whistle. He said, "Here's the whistle, but only because you're my friend." Landlord's got that whistle, and he's as happy as can be, thinking of all the money he's going to save. And he takes the whistle, puts it in his pocket, and he heads off down the road to go home. John gets up, he goes out on the porch, he sits in his favorite chair, and he's rocking away. The landlord gets home, and as soon as he opens the door, there's his wife waiting for him. And the wife says, "I told you this morning when you left that all my relatives are coming over here for a big dinner. Did you forget? Hurry up and get ready so you can meet them when they come." So he goes in, he gets himself all ready, comes out just in time to greet all the relatives, about 20 of them. So he brings them in, they all sit down at a table. The wife is bringing all of the food. She brings the food over, the landlord sits down. Just then he looks down and he sees that whistle. And he thinks to himself, boy, this is a good time to play a little trick on all of my wife's relatives. So, he's thinking. The wife brings him a big plate of food. Tastes that food. Spits it out, jumps up, and he starts hollering, "You stupid woman! You stupid woman! You stupid woman!" And he grabs a frying pan. Boom! Hits her over the head. She falls to the floor. All the relatives are just aghast. They're white. They start screaming, "You killed your wife! You killed your wife! You killed your wife! You killed your wife! You killed your wife!" The landlord said, "Well, of course I have. But watch this." He reaches in his pocket, he pulls out that whistle. He blows on the whistle, nothing happens. He blows on the whistle, nothing happens. And he blows and he blows and he blows, nothing happens. Finally, he realizes, John tricked him again. He goes ballistic. He starts running down that road to John's house, full speed, shaking his fists and hollering, "Green Pea John, Green Pea John." Goes right up to the door. He looks. John's not in the chair. He just doesn't even knock. He just goes, blasts right into the door, goes in, and he looks. There's Green Pea John, laying on top of the bed, perfectly still, perfectly silent. His wife is leaning over him. She's crying. And the landlord says, "Is he dead yet? Is he dead yet?" The wife is crying. "No, he's not dead, but he's so weak and he can't talk. He'll be dead soon." The landlord says, "Good, but I can't wait. I'm going to get rid of that cheat forever." He's got this big sack with him. So he takes John and he stuffs him in the sack. He takes the sack, brings it out, he puts it over the horse, and he gets off down to the river to drown John in the sack. Well, on the way to the river, he sees a church. And he thinks, I better stop here and go in and say some prayers for my wife. So he goes in. John is in that sack over the horse, and all of a sudden he hears something, some noise. So he thinks, well, maybe somebody's coming. So John screams out in a voice. He says, "Help! Help! I won't marry the king's daughter, so they're going to drown me in the river. Help! Help! I won't marry the king's daughter, so they're going to drown me in the river." Pretty soon he feels a sack. Somebody's untying the sack. And he sees light. He looks up, and he sees a young man dressed in beggar's clothes. The young man says, "What did you say?" And John says, "Well, I won't marry the king's daughter, so they're going to drown me in the river." The beggar says, "Well, I'll marry her. Then I'll be rich. Let me exchange places with you." So John jumps out of that sack. The beggar jumps in the sack. John ties it up, puts the sack over the horse. John goes home. Well, in the meantime, the landlord comes out of the church, and he grabs the reins of that horse, and he walks and goes down to the river. Now, when he gets to the river, he takes a sack and he puts it on the ground, and there's some big rocks there, and he's throwing the rocks in the sack. And he hears, "Ouch! I'll marry the king's daughter! I'll marry the king's daughter!" And he says, "Shut up, John, you stupid man. I'm going to get rid of you once and for all." He ties up that sack, throws it in the river. Breathes a sigh of relief. I finally got rid of that cheat. And he starts down the road going home. Well, he's got to pass by Green Pea John's house, and he just happens to look up, and his eyes bug right out of his head. There's Green Pea John sitting in that rocking chair, rocking away. The landlord can't believe it, so he goes over there and he said, "John, what are you doing here? Didn't you drown in the river?" John said, "Well, I went all the way to the bottom. You should have seen what's on the bottom of that river. Gold. Big bags of gold. Gold coins all over." Boy, that's all the landlord had to hear, and he's thinking, if I could just get to the bottom of that river, get back up, I'd have all of this gold. So he asked John, he said, "John, how did you get back to the top?" John said, "Well, I'll tell you a secret. There's an old story, an old tale. All you've got to do is take your belt, put it around your neck. When you get to the bottom of the river, you'll pull on it 3 times and you come right to the top." Well, that's all that landlord had to hear. "Thank you, John, and he runs down the road to the river. He gets to the river, takes off his belt, puts it around his neck, grabs a big rock, and jumps into the river, never to be seen again. Now, if you ever come across a guy who's very, very smart, but he's a little lazy, and his name is Green Pea John, watch out!" Okay, book checkout. Twig. An orange. Pear. Oh boy. Crocodile. Crocodile. A water cow. A water buffalo. Wonder what all of this has to do with today's story. A water buffalo, a crocodile, twig, fruit. Let's find out. If you remember, a couple of months ago, I told you a story. Concho in the Lime Pit. This is another Concho story. If you remember Concho, it's from the country of Indonesia. A little bitty creature, the size of a mouse, with a face like a deer. It's called a deer mouse. Now in Indonesia, there really is a little creature called the deer mouse. If you remember the story Concho in the Lime Pit with the banana bread, you remember that even though Concho is so small, he's got a big mouth. He is always talking. His mouth often gets him into trouble. But many times his mouth will get him out of trouble. Concho is a quick talker, very smart. He can usually outwit anybody. In Indonesia, Concho is considered a hero. They look up to him just like in this country most of us look up to the president or Shaquille O'Neal or Shaq as we call him, or Michael Jordan. Indonesian people think Concho is a hero. Now in this story, there are some Indonesian words that I will use. I'll explain them to you so you can understand the story. First story, when Concho was at the bottom of the pit, called out to the gods. Anybody remember what the god's name was? Allah. Yes, Allah. Allah is the Indonesian god. The crocodile is Bawana. Bawana. Water buffalo is Carbu. Carbu. There's another word, an American word. It'd be helpful if you know what it is. You can understand the story a little better. Census. We call the United States Census is a count of people. A count of the number of people. In this story, the census is going to be a count of crocodiles. Today's story. The Crocodile's War on Concho comes from this book, Concho in the Lime Pit, book of Indonesian folk tales. Crocodile's War on Concho. Once upon a time, long ago, Bawana, a crocodile, was crawling along the riverbank on his stomach, crawling around, slithering back and forth, crawling, slithering, looking. And what he was doing, he was hungry. He was looking for food or game. All of a sudden, bam! Big tree falls right on top of him across his back, pins him to the ground. Bawana's failing back and forth. Can't get loose. And he hollers, ow, ow, ow.
Oh, ow! Carbu. The water buffalo is on the bank above walking. He hears all this racket. He decides to come down to the riverbank and see what's going on. When he gets down there, Bwana looks up and he says, "Hi, Carbu, can you get this tree off of my back so I can go in peace?" Carbu bends over, he takes his horns, and he starts pushing on that tree. It's a big tree and it's very heavy. But Carbu doesn't give up. He pushes, 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 pushes. Bit by bit, little by little, bit by bit, little by little. Carbu finally moves that tree enough to free Bwana. Bwana looks up and he says, "Thank you, Carbu, but I'm so weak. Can you push me into the water?" So Carbu takes his horns and he pushes until Bwana the crocodile is floating in the water. Bwana looks and he says, "Further. Push me in further, further, further. Push further." Carbu is pushing, pushing further. Carbu pushes until he himself is into the water about up to his chest. All of a sudden, Carbu screams out, "Ow! Ow!" And he looks down. There's Bwana the croc, biting his leg, beak sinking into his leg. Carbu says, "Bwana, what are you doing? You're biting my leg, it hurts." Bwana says, "I'm hungry. I've got to eat." Bwana shouts out, or Carbu shouts out, "What? What? You can't eat me, you can't eat me. No, no. I saved your life. I took the tree off of your back or you would have died. Now you're going to reward me by eating me? You ungrateful creature. No, 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 no." He shouts. Well, on that bank above, there's little Concho, out for a little stroll. Walking along, and he hears all this racket. So being his inquisitive mind, as Concho has, he decides to go down and see what's going on. So he runs down to the riverbank. And he asks, "What's all this noise? What's going on?" There's Bwana, the croc, under that tree, frailing along, back and forth, flapping and flapping and flapping. Concho says again, "What's going on?" Carbu, the water buffalo, says, "Concho, this ungrateful creature here, Bwana, crocodile, is unfaithful, ungrateful. I saved his life. A big tree fell on his back. I got the tree off of his back. Now, to reward me, he's trying to eat me." Concho, or Bwana, looks up at Concho and he says, "But Concho, I'm hungry. I have to eat. I was interrupted. I was just getting ready to eat when a tree fell on me. I'm hungry. I've got to eat." So Concho steps back and crosses his arms. And he said, "You know, I think this calls for a legal opinion." Bwana looks at Concho and he says, "But Concho, who will be the judge?" Carbu looks up at Concho and he says, "Who will be the judge?" Concho says, "Well, I'll be the judge. But in order for me to render a legal opinion here, we're going to have to reenact the whole scene. We've got to put everything the way it was. So Bwana, you go up on the land, get next to the tree. Carbu, you go up on the land, you stand next to Bwana in the tree." So Bwana lets go of Carbu's leg, crawls and he slithers along the bank, gets next to the tree. Carbu limps out of the water, his leg is bleeding. He limps over and he stands next to Bwana in the tree. Concho comes up and he looks around. He says, you know, I still can't make a judgment here. I still can't give an opinion. We've got to get everything back exactly the way it was. So Carbu, can you push that tree back on top of Bwana? So Carbu gets down with his horns and he pushes and he pushes and he pushes and he pushes and he nudges. Sure enough, he gets that tree right back on top of Bwana, right on his back. Bwana's flapping around. Concho comes over and he looks at Bwana and he says, Bwana, is this the way it was? Bwana says, yes, Concho, it's exactly the way it was. Concho goes over and he looks at Carbu and he says, Carbu, is this the way it was? Carbu says, yes, Concho, this is exactly the way it was. Concho crosses his arms again. He says, yeah, now I see clearly. He goes over, points right at Bwana. He says, Bwana, you're a fool. You're ungrateful, faithless. Carbu here, the buffalo, saved your life. He took that tree off of you. I think he was crazy. I think he was a fool to do that. But if he wants to do it again, he may free me. Oh, no. No, sir, said Carbu the buffalo. I will not do this ungrateful creature one more favor. So both Carbu and Concho turn around and they start to walk away. There's Bwana under that tree, flapping around. He can't get loose. And he starts screaming, treacherous Concho, treacherous Concho, treacherous Concho. You tricked me. You made me look stupid. In the name of crocodiles everywhere, I declare war on Concho. Concho turns around, he looks at Bwana under that tree flapping around, and he says, you know, Bwana, you're in no position to declare war on anyone. So both Carbu and Concho walk away. Well, you would expect, days later, there's Concho taking a little stroll along the riverbank up on top, walking with his little legs, walking along. All of a sudden he stops. He smells something. It smells delicious. His mouth starts to water. He's drooling. He smells fruit. Well, you remember how Concho loved bananas. He loves any kind of fruit. The fruit is making him drool, and he's thinking, I know that smell is coming from across the river. I got to get over there and taste some of that fruit. So he goes down to the riverbank, puts his little foot in the shallow water. Up jumps a big crocodile. Crocodile screams, war on Concho, war on Concho, war on Concho. And he lunges to bite Concho's foot. But instead of grabbing his foot, grabs onto a twig. Concho, being as smart as he is, screams, ow, 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 you're biting my foot. Crocodile keeps tugging and tugging. Concho, being so smart, says, you're pulling me. If you pull much harder, you're going to pull me right into the water, and I'm going to drown, and I'm going to die. Crocodile keeps pulling and pulling. Concho jumps out of the water, runs down the bank. He's running, little feet going. The smell comes back. He's drooling. You can just taste that luscious fruit. He's thinking, I got to get over to cross the river, taste that fruit. He sees another crossing. He stops. This time he's a little more careful. He looks in the water, and he sees this big black object floating. Concho thinks, I bet that's a crocodile. Could be a log. He steps back and he says, "Are you a crocodile?" Of course, that crocodile, he's smart too, doesn't say a word. Concho says, "Or are you a log?" Again, no answer. Concho's thinking, what am I going to do? So he pretends he's talking out loud and he says, "You know, if this were a crocodile, he'd be floating downstream with the rest of the crocodiles. But a crocodile is pretty smart. He doesn't move." Concho says, "But if you were a log, you'd be floating upstream." Concho looked. Sure enough, that object started floating upstream. "Aha!" Concho hollers. "Just as I thought, you're a crocodile. Who ever heard of a log floating upstream?" Concho takes off running as fast as he can, his little legs going. He smells that smell closer. Just can't stand it. He's just drooling, his nose is running, his mouth is watering. He's got to get over, across the river to get to the fruit. Then he's thinking, he comes to another cross, goes down and he looks and he's thinking, how am I going to get across the river to get the fruit? He steps back, looks, and he sees ripples all across. But every time he sees a ripple, up pops a crocodile head. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Crocodiles all over. Concho scratches his head and he's thinking, steps back. All of a sudden, he gets up on his little hind legs and he starts to pound his chest. And he hollers out, "Crocodiles everywhere! Listen to me, Allah has spoken, Allah has spoken. Allah says today we must conduct a census of crocodiles. We've got to count all the crocodiles in the world. So all the crocodiles come to the top of the water to be counted." He started popping up. Crocodiles floating on top of the water. All over. As far as you can see, crocodiles. Concho kept beating on his chest. "Today, I'm going to count in the name of Allah all the crocodiles in the world. Allah wants it written down how many crocodiles there are. So all you crocodiles, come to the top of the river." Sure enough, more popped up. It just kept popping up. Pretty soon, as far as you could see, all the way across the river, crocodiles were floating on top of the water. Concho said once more, pounding his chest, "Allah says that you must, that all crocodiles must lay perfectly still. If you move, it'll screw up Allah's count. You don't want the count messed up, so lie perfectly still, as Allah requests." All the crocodiles just lay there perfectly still. Concho steps back and looks. Takes a step onto the first crocodile. He says, "One, in the name of Allah." Jumps to the next crocodile. "Two, in the name of Allah." Next one. "Three, in the name of Allah." 4, 5, 6, in the name of Allah. 7, 8, 9. All the crocodiles join in the name of Allah. 10, 11, 12. All the crocodiles join in the name of Allah. 13, 14, 15. All the crocs join in the name of Allah. Concho takes one giant last leap and lands on the other side of the river. Turns around, stands on his hind legs, beats his chest. "In the name of Allah, I, Concho, declare the census is over. The count is finished." All the crocodiles begin to submerge into the river, and they're all gone. Concho turns around, runs into the forest. I know what he's doing in there, do you? What do you think he's doing? Sure, he's eating the fruit. Once again, Concho outsmarts everybody. We've got 5 minutes.